Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of the UTI Swatantra Facebook Live. I'm Nikhil Ananda, standing in for Govindraj Ethiraj, who is traveling today. Well, like with everything else in life, your finances also need a regular review, and on the show today we're going to be particularly discussing whether you are ready for a midterm review of your finances. And joining us as always, two very special guests. We have Mr. Neville Poncha, who's the founder at Intellect's Money, who's joining us here in the studio. Joining us with him is Tarun Birani, who's the founder and CEO of TBNG Capital Advisors. Thank you very much for taking out the time and coming here to answer our viewers' queries. And before we begin the show, can I ask you both to tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you help people grow and multiply their money. So, Mr. Poncha, if I can begin with you.
Sure. So I've been in the markets for about 25 odd years. Earlier I was with a private sector bank and I set up their wealth management business. For the last 5 years I've branched out and I'm dealing with various high net worth individuals and helping them with their asset allocation and then their investment both in domestic funds and some of the overseas funds and debt products.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I started this practice almost 15 years back. Post my MBA, I just 8 months I worked and I started on this firm, TBNG Capital, and we are currently SEBI registered investment advisor, RIAs, and our focus is entirely on the financial planning, goal oriented planning as well as investment review. That's what we do all the time.
Great. So, lots of questions I'm sure that will be coming in, but this show is going to be dedicated particularly to reviewing your finances, and it's a common practice for companies to do an annual review, for instance, of their employees. Is this concept of reviewing also very important in the personal finance space?
It's actually very critical that we do this on a very regular basis. Investors tend to prefer to invest what they see, money lying in their bank account or some flows which they are expecting to get shortly. They tend to overlook what they have already invested in. And if you were an investor for the last, say, 10, 15 years, the amount of corpus you would have generated is far substantially more than what you would have to invest currently.
Correct.
They tend to not prioritize that, and that's why we try to get our clients to see as to what they should be doing and look at it from an overall portfolio point of view, rather than just what they have to invest in the next month or two.
So, Tarun, what purpose does making sure that you review your investments serve, and particularly in a market like this where it's a bit volatile? Perhaps for a lot of people things haven't panned out according to their goals. How important is it to review?
Sure. So very good thing which you started with is on the goals part. It's not very important to create a financial plan or a goals for yourself. It is very important to keep revisiting, review, reevaluate these goals all the time. What we have seen is in the changing conditions, there are a lot of changes which are happening. It's very important to first of all keep a long-term focus on everything what you have planned before. To ensure that long-term focus is there, the review helps you bring that control feeling, what is happening. Otherwise what happens, we tend to feel the media, the noise all around us always tells us that there's something happening with my portfolio. It gives a lot of impatience, a challenge in terms of a long-term thing. A review brings you that, okay, I'm fine, I'm doing well, let me keep that long-term motive. That is something, the first part. Reevaluating the goals. I think we all have a lot of needs and things are changing all the time. Like I have a kid born in a family 3 years back. I think my goals and priorities have changed dramatically. I have a change in income, I have a fall in income. I think a lot of things which are changing. So this is very important to make sure you keep reviewing all those things every 6 monthly. Accordingly, let's say you need to increase your life insurance, you need to increase risk in your portfolio. All these need to be incorporated, and mid-term structured review is the only way to achieve that.
Right. So I'm going to pick up on that point because the circumstances in everybody's life keeps changing. You get married, you have kids, you have a change in job, perhaps you get a better salary, etc., etc. So how does one practically reshape one's financial plan to reflect these changes in life?
So the best thing to do is actually look forward rather than look backward. People tend to look backward and see that, this investment or this fund didn't do well and whether I should move in and out of that. We should actually be looking forward. As you said, everything changes, and look to see what are the new opportunities. So many companies today or so many funds today which are top performing funds may not have had a 10 or 15 year track record, but they have been very good for the investors.
Yeah.
We've even seen SEBI coming out with rules and regulations, changing the funds, categorizing the funds. So we've also seen that investors have not necessarily recategorized their fund portfolios, even though SEBI has recategorized funds. And many of the mutual funds have followed and followed that path. So that's why it's very, very important to look forward and do a rebalance of your portfolio on a very regular basis.
Right. So we'll get to the rebalancing bit in just a bit, but now that we're all talking about a midterm review, I think it's important to spell out what a midterm review is in terms of how often should you be doing it. Should it be a monthly thing? Should it be an annual thing? A half-yearly thing? I mean, how often do you suggest people do
As
it?
Tarun said, I think if you do it half-yearly, that would be good enough. Doing it monthly would really be being very volatile, and then you'll be sort of guided by what the current flavor of the market is, and you may tend to make mistakes. So if you've got your asset allocation right, as Tarun said, see that you are on the right path. Doing it too often would be detrimental, and not doing it at all would be detrimental. So every 6 months would be opportune.
And so you agree with that? Every 6
Yeah,
months?
so I completely agree with Neville
Yeah.
that at least a 6 monthly review is extremely important. On a quarter basis, there could be a basic portfolio asset allocation changes. Check can be done if the size of the portfolio is very high. I think that is what I suggest, but a 6 monthly structured review is something one has to go through.
Okay, so Neville spoke about rebalancing. Now, what exactly does the rebalancing of a portfolio mean? And can you illustrate that perhaps with an example and the circumstances in which you need to rebalance your portfolio?
So, the mantra, and all these 15 years, I have realized one thing. Most of the 90% of the returns which we make in markets or investments, 90% comes through asset allocation. The right asset allocation is something which helps you bring that kind of thing. In that orientation, it's very important to define a core and a satellite portfolio. What is a core holding which you always continue to hold? And satellite are something which you may look at tactically, look at doing based on the market behavior. So now rebalancing is something like I think we have a classic example a week before where in 2 days we have seen market, a Sensex moving 3,000 points
Correct.
up, or a 10%, 9 to 10% rise.
After
just
that
in
volume of announcements from the finance.
So a 10% rise, 9% rise in 2 days is something where an investor would like to look at their portfolio, at least if the asset allocation mix. So asset allocation.
So look at means whether to sell and book profit or so on and so forth.
So the most important part is what is your risk taking ability, the risk tolerance, right?
Yeah.
And risk tolerance can't be like you are a 30-year-old guy, you need to have 100% equity. No, it depends on what has been your past circumstances, what is your income generating capability. All those things matter while defining a risk tolerance capability. Once a risk tolerance is defined, there is an ideal asset allocation which is defined for you. Based on that, what is your actual asset allocation? That gap can be identified all the time.
So what is the, I mean, of course, nothing is written in stone,
Yes.
but in terms of benchmarks, what is this sort of ideal allocation according to age?
So I always give 3-4 big parameters I look at while defining asset allocation. One is what is the age you are in right now. What has been your investing experience? If you have never invested in equity and I tell you to invest everything in equity, that's not the right way. What are your important goals? Let's say you are looking at investment for 2-year horizon. I think equity or a high risk category is not a category for you. So all those things can be looked at. But a normal rule of game has been 100 minus the age is something as an asset allocation. People use it in a very, very easy manner. If you want to look at something that can be looked
100
at.
minus the age for?
The equity proportion, the high risk proportion can be looked at accordingly.
Okay. Neville, what are the costs or the transactional fees that are associated with this rebalancing that one needs to do?
Yeah. So if you rebalance, obviously whenever you get out of an investment, there could be the incidence of tax. a bit of brokerage or a mutual fund load, but they're apart from the tax part, they are very small. So I don't think they're really detrimental to you doing a rebalance, because you're actually getting your portfolio on track. It's sort of like going to a doctor and going for a checkup. You won't say, I don't want to go for a checkup because I don't want to pay the doctor's fees.
Correct.
Because in the long run, it's what you need to do. So it's just like the annual checkup where you pay a few thousand rupees. It's worthwhile. But tax is a big impediment to this. So you have to be a bit careful as to how you rebalance, and rebalance the investments which will have the least incidence of tax.
So, Tarun also spoke about the equity component and 100 minus the 8 and so on and so forth. But if I were to ask you to spell out how many funds one should have in their portfolio to achieve some sort of ideal in diversification.
So if we're just talking about equity funds, I don't think you should have more than 4 or 5 equity funds. Again, I don't think we should be too fixated about the number of funds, because there are some funds which could be a multi-cap funds, or an investor could buy a large cap, a medium cap, and a small cap fund. Now there'll be 3 funds, but investor B has just 1 fund. So as long as you're diversified across the various asset classes, I don't think that should be possible. If you're a investor who's just starting, I would say in the first 5 years, it's better to go in for a multi-cap fund rather than specific funds. If you're a seasoned investor, then you could even go in for sectoral funds, but that you should do once you have a decently sized corpus and after about 5 years of experience. So then you could move into a larger number of funds, maybe from a more tactical point.
Right.
Your core portfolio could be diversified funds, and maybe if you feel that, say, pharma has taken a beating and you want to get into pharma over the next 1 or 2 years, you could look to do that. Or you feel consumption is a very stable story, you could look to do that. But that's after about 4 or 5 years of building your core portfolio.
Right, after you've dipped your feet into the market.
Yes.
But Tarun, is there such a thing as over diversification, and is that a problem? And if so, why is it a problem? Can it affect your return potential?
Yeah. So I see it all the time. First of all, people buy mutual fund. Mutual fund in itself has a 60 to 70 stock in a portfolio. In that also, they end up diversifying in 10 to 20 funds. I came across recently with a client, almost 25 funds he has in his portfolio. I realize, I think there is so much duplication. Right? So end of the day, you don't.
So what's the psychology behind it? I mean, why do people do it?
So you can't trust anyone, right? Yeah. You are not ready to trust with your money. So that's where, and I think education is the biggest problem. People are not financially educated that how they need to invest. So that's where they end up investing in so many funds, and that's operationally so inefficient for you. And when you do a review, when you have a 30 funds in your portfolio or a 4 funds in your portfolio, I'm sure you would be looking at underperformers, taking action, decision would be much more seamless and fast. In a 30 fund portfolio, you will end up doing nothing. And I think I have seen all the time this kind of challenges. So I think the important part is, as Neville rightly said, not more than 4 or 5 funds in your portfolio, and they need to have a low correlation with each other. So let's say one fund is going down and it is also going down. I think it doesn't match the purpose. I need to have, let's say, a small cap in a portfolio or a large cap in the portfolio, which are non-aligned, right? Yes, equity will go down, both will go down, but end of the day, purpose for both has been different.
They have to mitigate the risks on each other. You want to weigh on.
The other reason why people tend to have too many funds is they take advice from too many people. So you have a couple of advisors, or you'll say your friend did something, or your uncle suggested something to you 5 years ago, and then you tend to have a whole host of funds. You not only is it funds, you may even have the odd couple of insurance policies and maybe some direct shares, and so then you get more of a khichdi type of a portfolio, and then becomes very difficult to figure out what to really do with them. Investors also tend to prefer not to book losses. So if something is not doing too well, there's a resistance to actually get out of it and move to something better, and therefore you have a suboptimal portfolio.
Right.
Because if you have too many funds, then you're effectively just buying the whole stock market. As Tarun said, you have 60 funds, and there'll be a bit of overlap. Then you just have too many stocks, and
it's difficult to manage all of it.
Yeah, it's impossible to manage it.
So one thing I have realized the challenge here is people are grossly unorganized and unplanned. People have 15 bank account. I came across a client who has 15 bank account. He doesn't know some 5,000 is here, 7,000 is there. I was in that company, that time that bank account, this bank account. So LIC policies, like he rightly said, so many advisors keep coming. So they are completely unorganized. And end of the day, they don't try to organize that, create let's say a dashboard for all the investment. All these things need to be organized.
Correct.
Once you are organized and you get a single eye view, I think then you tend to make faster decision, better decision, and more strategic decision. And that's the challenge of this game.
You know, we're actually going to come to advice in just a bit on how you go about that. But before that, let's take a few questions that came to us on email. So this is, Neville, if I can take this to Mr. Sandeep Roy asking, my mutual fund portfolio has given me positive returns for the past 5 years, but I haven't done any review until now. Is it really necessary for me to start?
Yes, because the first thing he needs to do is to review it with its peer group and then review it with the benchmark. So positive returns is a given if you've invested for a couple of years, but it's always better to just check as to how you've done with in relation to the benchmark. If you are beating the benchmarks and you've got really good funds, then there's nothing to be done. But if for some reason you haven't been doing that, we should look at it. The other thing which people also tend not to do well is the amount. What is the quantum of equity in your portfolio vis-a-vis other investments? So, you know, somebody started with doing a SIP of 20,000 rupees, and then when their salary increased, they just kept it at 20 or 30,000 rupees. So that is also important from the overall portfolio. How much of equity is there in your overall portfolio? That also tends to be important.
Okay, you know, there's some live questions from Facebook as well, and Monica Chadha is asking how to rebalance a portfolio without moving money into investments. I don't know exactly what she means. But perhaps you can take the next question. How can I avoid over diversification of my portfolio? I think we, you answered that. There's Sunil Kumar Singla who's asking, I have 50,000 rupees and I want to invest in mutual funds for tax saving purposes. Please tell me where to invest.
Yeah, so he's looking at a monthly investment of 50,000?
No, he's not specified.
Okay, for tax saving, I think he has 3-4 options available. Let's say if he doesn't want to take risk, PPF is the best option. NSC, PPF, all these are options which he can look at. There is an option called NPS where he can invest, which has debt, equity, low risk, all these options available. And the fourth option which he can look at is ELSS, Equity Linked Savings Scheme. So this has a 3-year lock-in and all the investment goes for equity. So if he has that kind of risk appetite, he can look at ELSS category.
Okay. To add to that, you also have the retirement benefit funds. Some of them have the ATC benefit. The difference is that they aren't 3 years, but their lock-in is 5 years, but they can also have a higher debt component. So if he's a first-time investor, I would actually suggest retirement benefit fund. Its lock-in is only 5 years, and that's comparable to most other tax saving schemes, which tend to have maybe even a longer lock-in period.
Right.
So that could be a good thing in these volatile markets, not to go straight into equity or to stagger his 50,000 rupees maybe until March, so he does not get hit if there's any volatility. The reason I say this is because if for some reason there is a negative the market tends to go down, then to get the gentleman back into the equity market over the next 2-3 years tends to be difficult.
Right.
So it's always better to be more conservative when you get somebody in. Let them have a good experience, and then they will actually put more money into the equity market.
Right. You know, one more question on email, and this is Asha Nair. My father is 55 years old. He has a number of investments in equity funds. Should he continue investing in equity or shift to debt? Now, this, I think, is a common dilemma among people, especially at an older age, where they sort of tend to believe that equity is more risky and thus they should shift to debt, which is more conservative. How would you advise them to go about it?
So there is no common rule that you just reach 50, so you should move all the money in debt. I always feel that what are the requirements they have, but surely as you reach closer to your retirement age, the common rule of thumb is to ensure that you have money in conservative assets so that you can meet regular income, because the regular income stops for you at that point of time. So it is a good exercise to start getting your portfolio rebalanced. The starting of that rebalancing exercise could be looked at, and there are a lot of options available where one can look at doing that. Like as he rightly mentioned, all these retirement oriented categories are very good categories where you can, based on your asset allocation, again these portfolios based on age in itself keep changing the debt equity structure. So I think those also could be looked at.
Okay, I want to sort of ask you to delineate between two terms that are often sort of used as one, or often confused. One is of course investment plan and the other is the financial plan. They might sound very similar, but they are different, aren't they? And how are they different?
Yes. So whenever somebody meets us and they ask us what we want to do, they just think that all we are going to talk about is what is the next hot investment. But that actually isn't the goal. The goal is to have a diversified portfolio which will meet your needs. And also it will incorporate life insurance, God forbid if something were to happen to you, health insurance, to take care of any mishaps. It could even be things like funding you'd have at some point in time, requirements. So it's all financial products rather than just investments. Investments tends to be the most thought of product, but all financial products are equally important in a financial plan rather than an investment plan.
Okay. I want to take another question that's come in on Facebook, and this is Mr. G. Ramaswamy, who asks, can I review my portfolio by myself or should I hire a financial advisor? And he's actually preempted my next set of questions. What's the role of a financial advisor in all of this? Because, for a layman, all of this, sounds very confusing. They perhaps may not know how to begin, when to review, when to stop, when to buy, so on and so forth. So how important is a financial advisor?
Sure. So there was a study which was done by Vanguard. Vanguard is globally the biggest asset manager, and they did a study wherein what is the difference in returns over a long period of time, doing it yourself versus doing it with the help of a trusted financial advisor.
Yeah.
And the results, this is purely on a US context, the returns difference has been approximately 3.5 to 4% extra returns.
Through a financial advisor?
Through a financial advisor on an annualized basis.
Right.
And the big component of that 4% comes, 50 to 70% comes through behavior coaching. And I have a very classic example I'll give you in my last midterm review with a client. And this was, I'm going back to 2013, where if you remember, India was called like a fragile five. And we were like, the markets were at all-time lows, and my client, who was already a 7-year client with us, his portfolio, even with high equity exposure, the returns were less than inflation. He said, Tarun, we did everything, we did long-term, this, that and everything, still our returns are low. What should we do? Should we get out of them and put their money in a fixed deposit? And trust me, 2 months back, this was a similar dilemma a lot of investors were going through. At that point of time, I asked him 2 questions. First is, do you need this money today for anything? He said, no, even if I exit this, I am going to invest this money somewhere. This was first. Second, is any of your investments underperforming? We reviewed all the investment, they were closer to their benchmark or higher than benchmarks only. That's what in the review we keep doing. Then after that, we realized the markets are the problem, and markets are there all the time low, and we need to give more time to the investment. You won't believe, in 6 months his portfolio was up 50%. That's the power of behavior coaching.
And that's the power, I think, of the expertise that a financial advisor.
Yeah, so that's where I am like coaching all the time, that your goals are 10 years away. Why do you need to look at today's fall? You need to look at the bigger picture.
Right.
And I think as a dispassionate, so when a doctor can't do a surgery of his own kid, in the same way, when you manage your own money, I think you get emotional about it.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And you tend to take decision based on what you read in newspaper, what your friend tells, and that's where advice, because I am completely independent and my role is to give you the best advice.
Correct.
And that's where it matters.
Just to sort of, add on to that very quickly, how do you choose a financial advisor? Do they need to be certified? Do they need to have certain sort of official permissions so that you take them seriously? That's one. And second, once you hire a financial advisor, is the onus of reviewing your portfolio on you or on him?
To the first question, yes, we do get certified and we have to pass necessary tests and exams. The second one is that the onus is actually on the individual to do it, because just like the gentleman in the previous question, he's not done it for some amount of time. So while we do tell our clients that we must review, they tend to not give the same amount of time and energy on that. So the onus to do it is actually a joint thing which you need to do, and your
but you can't be
advisor,
completely hands off.
No, you cannot. You cannot be completely hands off. It's jointly done, because even your goals and situations may change.
Yeah.
And it could be, and generally it is for the better. So you always need to know from your clients that this is going to happen. This is what I'm going to do. This is why I need to create this amount for my son, daughter, grandchild. So those things happen, and therefore we have to go on changing and tweaking the plan and rebalancing as per the client. Otherwise, we'll just be doing something in a vacuum without necessarily knowing what the client is looking at. And if the client just does it himself, he does not know what the market forecasts are.
Correct.
So that's why if we do it hand in hand, we get the best of both.
It's a collaborative process. And what are the minimum charges that one needs to pay for financial advice?
So if you are working with a mutual fund distributor, generally they will be getting a commission, and that commission would be
takes care of
that should take care of that. So I don't think reviewing is a separate sort of charge point. It is an ongoing thing you should be doing with your financial advisor on a regular basis.
So the financial advisor is actually getting commission from the industry. You don't need to pay them anything separately. That's mostly
that tends to be how the market.
Okay,
works.
Final question, because we have to wrap it up.
So I want to add one point on this, and I think so there is a separate set of advisory. I think 5 years on, SEBI has started this. This is called Registered Investment Advisor, and this is where. So this set of advisor doesn't make any money through commissions, and that's where the advice can be much more independent and pure.
Yeah.
So the client can look at that platform also. Registered investment advisors, the advisory is completely focused around the goals and the client needs.
There's no conflict of interest.
No conflict of interest, and that is the big part.
That's a very important point.
Yeah.
Just as we start wrapping up, one question, for me to be an aware investor, what are some of the calendar events that I should be alert to? I mean, I can think of the budget, but just purely in terms of doing these reviews of your finances or your investments, what are the other things that I should keep watch on when it comes to the news?
So I think first of all, discipline is the most important part of it, and I think you need to first of all trust someone. The most important part is there. In terms of calendar, I think a 6 monthly basis is giving a good amount of time, and there should be a lot of pre-work and post-work which need to be done before this review meeting. So it is very important for you to share all the information correctly in that review meeting. So what has been the change?
Yeah, but what I was getting at was,
so it could be, say, at the time of your increments.
Yeah.
That again could be a milestone. In case there is any change in circumstance, that also could come. Interest rates, no, that should be taken care of. Your mutual fund will take care of your interest rates. Tax. Say, for example, last week's change in taxation. Now, your mutual fund manager should know as to how to move and which company to buy and sell. You don't have to start, jigging around your portfolio unless it's a change in interest rate which affects you.
Right.
This change which happened sometime back, a week back, did not really change personal taxation rates. So there's nothing really for us to do in that case.
Based on my experience last working with 15, every 6 monthly review takes care of everything. Your salary is increased. Okay, 2 months salary increase will be there. I think we will anyway meet in the review meeting. We'll make those changes. Right. So there is no need to get panicked. Let's say markets are going up or interest rates are going down, this, that and all. I think what is important is these structured 6 monthly reviews are most important. Otherwise, what one can look at, a 10% plus and minus in the portfolio is also something where you can have a special situation reviews can be looked at. So let's say your portfolio goes up by significantly or goes down significantly. I think that is the time, again, a special review, because you may like to rebalance your portfolio accordingly. So that can be looked at.
All right, Mr. Pocha, Tarun, thank you very much for this insightful discussion. Hope we've goaded at least some people out there to make sure that they do their own midterm financial review. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the UTI Swatantra Facebook Live. We're coming back to you on October 10th, I beg your pardon, at 5 p.m. again, and very interesting topic. Stop wishing, start investing. So do join us then. Goodbye.